What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Valley coming at you with the start of our What If project over here at HardwoodKnocks. Before we get started, very quickly, if it's your first time checking us out, please consider throwing us that permanent subscription wherever you're getting your podcast, following the show on Spotify and Apple, downloading every episode, throwing us ratings and reviews are the best way to help us. Also, please feel free to promote us on Twitter. If you want to clip something, shout us out. If people are looking for podcast recommendations, throw us into those. That is all appreciated as well. This What If project is essentially, I spoke with people who cover, follow, root for, and every NBA team. Super smart, awesome people. And I asked them simply for what is their biggest what if moment for that franchise. It could have been in recent history of all time. It was this person's individual what if moment for the franchise that they specifically cover. And the aim was sort of just to target these what if scenarios and identify and unpack them for NBA squad and figure out just the ripple effects. Had there been something that could have altered the course of history? And that's essentially how I went about this. And this will be an audio version of an article that is up at Bleacher Report. So if it's tough to follow, I will try to remember to include the link into the description. I'm really excited to deliver this to you, though. And without further delay, let's get to some NBA what ifs. Up next, we will do the Atlantic Division, the 5 teams in there. And so that means that we will begin with the Boston Celtics. Legacy franchises are always inundated with what if moments, if only because they've been around so long that they have to accumulate them. The Boston Celtics, though, are teaming with what might have beens and roads not taken in the not so distant past. What if they never traded down in the 2017 draft? Would they really still have taken Jason Tatum at number 1? What happens if Isaiah Thomas never suffered a career-altering hip injury? Or hell, what if they never traded for Thomas in the first place? What if Gordon Hayward never suffered his dislocated ankle and fractured leg? Or Kyrie Irving never left? What if they had been the team that traded for Paul George or for Kawhi Leonard? The list of options over the past 7 seasons or so is like endless. But because I'm a monster, I forced Alex Kungu, who's been on the podcast many times before and also does now and again give musings over at Hoop Island, or at least used to. I forced him to narrow it down. He chose the Anthony Davis transaction that never was. At the time of AD's trade request, Alex told me, the Celtics were towing the line between 2 timelines. On one side, they had Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, and Al Horford, who were a versatile trio that with the acquisition of Davis would give them the necessary star talent to compete for a title. On the other side, they had Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, a young, talented group with a proven ability to play winning basketball, but still a few years away from being called on to compete for a title. Though nothing was ever official, there was an understanding that all or at least Tatum plus one of the two would be involved in any Davis trade when Boston was legally allowed to make one because of the rule with extensions and Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis. Fast forward 3 years, Alex continued, and Kyrie has left, but struggled with staying on the court. Hayward has been similarly plagued with injuries, and Davis, though he won a ring in his first year with LA, has endured durability issues as well. For a second, Alex said, imagine a world where Boston would have to watch Smart develop into a floor general, defensive player of the year caliber point guard, Jalen turn into an all-star, and Tatum a top 10 player, all while they hitched their wagons to the injury-riddled veterans who either couldn't stay on the court or were already plotting their way out of town. God bless Rich Paul and the Clutch Sports organization. Me personally, this is Dan. I'm LOLing at that last line. I hope you are too. The Brooklyn Nets. Many will gravitate to the Brooklyn Nets trading their entire future for an aging Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce in 2013. But this organization has delivered bulletin board material in droves just over the past few years alone. Most of it isn't good. Getting Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in 2019 was seen as a coup. It has instead fomented an avalanche of missed possibilities. What if the organization didn't capitulate to its stars so thoroughly that it forced Coach Kenny Atkinson out the door? What if it didn't trade for James Harden? What if Kyrie had taken the COVID-19 vaccine? Would Harden still be in Brooklyn? Would Durant have never requested a trade and then never have rescinded said trade request? What if the Nets simply didn't acquiesce to Harden's own trade request this past season? None of these options ended up winning out for the Daily News' Christian Winfield, who rightfully chose KD's could have been a 3 from Game 7 of the 2021 semifinals. This is what he wrote to me. Talk about a franchise-altering shot that ends up taking the game into overtime instead of sending the Milwaukee Bucks packing. If KD's foot wasn't on the line, the Nets would easily dispose of the Hawks in the conference finals and then get to the NBA finals against a well-oiled but not nearly as talented Phoenix Suns team. They also, as I reported, would have gotten a somewhat healthy Spencer Dinwiddie back in the NBA finals. If KD's toe hadn't been on the line, Christian continued, we're looking at the Nets as NBA champions. We're looking at James Harden maybe deciding to stay and sign long-term. We're looking at validation of the decision to bring KD and Kyrie to Brooklyn in the first place, instead of now perpetually fielding questions as to whether it was the right move, given the Nets have come up short in 3 straight seasons. And if KD's foot wasn't on the line, we're looking at the Nets giving New York City its first NBA championship since the 1970s. We're looking at the Nets as basketball immortality instead of watching them devolve into mere mortals in a first-round sweep by the Celtics this past season. For what it's worth, to me, this is Dan, we're also probably looking at a Milwaukee Bucks team coached by someone other than Mike Budenholzer, something that kind of falls by the wayside of the Kevin Durant shot. But yeah, this I think accurately beats out anything else, and the prospect of a championship always does. Next up is the New York Knicks. Think of an NBA season over the past 4 decades. Any NBA season. The New York Knicks probably have a what-if moment, transaction development, whatever, from that year. What if they didn't negotiate against themselves in the Carmelo Anthony trade in 2011? What if they never dealt for Andrea Bargnani during the 2013 offseason? What if Amari Stoudemire's health never implodes? What if they don't sign Stat in the first place? What if Steph Curry falls 1 pick lower? What if Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving join the Knicks rather than the Nets? What if Michael Jordan left Chicago for New York in 1996? What if Patrick Ewing's knees never implode? The list goes on and on and on. Kudos to Knicks Film School's Jonathan Macri, with a major assist from KFS's producer extraordinaire, Andrew Claudio, both of them friends of the podcast, for winnowing it down. This is what John Macri wrote. My number one what if harkens back to 1987 and New York's decision to part ways with Bernard King. King, for those younger fans who may not be familiar, was for a time perhaps the best player ever to suit up for the Knicks. In the 1983-84 season, he finished second to Larry Bird in MVP voting, and he was just getting started. After averaging 26 points per game in 83-84, King was putting up nearly 33 per night in 1984-85. That's when tragedy struck, and he tore his ACL in March 1985, which would keep him out for 2 years. By the time he returned, the franchise had received a somewhat significant talent upgrade in the form of Patrick Ewing. Unfortunately, when King returned to play 6 games at the tail end of the 1986-87 season, Ewing himself was sidelined. Knicks brass never saw them share the same court, but nonetheless decided to move on from King despite him having just turned 30. It turned out to be a big mistake. King caught on with Washington, steadily building his scoring average back up over the next 4 seasons, from 17 to 20 to 22, and then all the way up to 28 per game in the 1990-91 season, a feat that resulted in an all-star berth and selection to the All-NBA third team. New York, meanwhile, was wasting the talents of Ewing, who had just finished with consecutive top 5 MVP finishes, not to mention Mark Jackson, the 1988 Rookie of the Year, who made an all-star team in his second year, and the newly acquired Charles Oakley. They were good, but not quite good enough, with a glaring need for a scoring wing in place of sub-elite talents like Gerald Wilkins, Johnny Newman, and Kiki Vandeweghe. King would have been a perfect fit, perhaps even good enough to make the difference against the Bulls in a 1989 second-round defeat that turned out to be Rick Pitino's last games as Knicks head coach. Ultimately, this isn't a perfect what-if, because King's return was short-lived thanks to another knee injury in 1991. Still, the greatest question in franchise history will always be what Ewing would have been able to do with a true running mate. We nearly had the answer, Macri wrote, but unfortunately, Knicks fans will always be left guessing. I agree with him. I think I probably would have went with a bunch of other stuff in that. Maybe what if they had amnestied Amari Stoudemire, myself, or even the Bargnani one kind of still eats at me. There are a couple of draft day decisions. What if they drafted Shea? What if they drafted Halliburton to sort of stay in the recent past? But I think Macri chose the right one for sure. The Philadelphia 76ers are up next. Recent history is drowning in Philadelphia 76ers what-ifs. Bleacher Report's Brian Toporek went with the one that cast a pale over the organization in real time and after the fact. This is what he wrote to me. Given the trickle-down effects, I have to go with the Sixers trading up to the number 1 overall pick in 2017 and taking Markelle Fultz over Jason Tatum. We don't need to rehash the Fultz saga in Philadelphia, and ironically, it might wind up having a happy ending for the Sixers. They sent him to Orlando for a top 20 protected first-round pick, which they used to select Tyrese Maxey. But with Tatum already looking like a top 10 player, Toporek continued, presumably with tears in his eyes, by the way, guys. It's impossible not to wonder what a core of Tatum and Joel Embiid could have accomplished over the next decade. If the Celtics go on to win a title with Tatum and Jaylen Brown, the Sixers will likely regret this decision more than anything else during the process era. It's a testament to Maxi's ascent for me, Dan, that this no longer feels like the only option. Also, Fultz was almost universally considered the top prospect in the 2017 class. So can we even be sure that the Celtics would have taken Tatum at number 1 if they didn't trade the pick? And where was Tatum on the Sixers' board at the time? Would they have taken him if they stayed at number 3? And there are just other potential nominees that come at you in spades. What if Jimmy Butler doesn't leave in 2019 free agency? What if Kawhi Leonard misses? That's all you need to hear. What if Ben Simmons doesn't pass out of the caps lock layup? What if the Sixers traded Simmons sooner? What if that Simmons trade takes place while retaining Butler? What if Sam Hinkie never leaves? And what if, this is Toporek actually reminded me of this, they don't trade Mikal Bridges on draft night in 2018? And what if Embiid doesn't miss the first 2 years of his career? And what if he's not banged up beyond comprehension this past postseason in 2022? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Sixers are just chock full of recent what ifs. Next team up is the Toronto Raptors. For a franchise with a fairly significant amount of prominent what ifs, the Toronto Raptors' selection felt shockingly singular while I was doing this. So I asked Yasmin Duale of the Dishes and Dimes podcast, as well as the Walrus. This is what she wrote to me. I'd say that the biggest what if, the most pivotal hypothetical for the Raptors would be Kawhi Leonard remaining on the team. His brief stint culminated in a championship. The framework for the team would have remained relatively strong heading into the following season, and that Raptors team likely would have dominated a bubble postseason run considering the competition of the 2019-2020 campaign. Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet have improved tremendously since that run, and some Raptors fans believe that under Leonard's leadership, they might have had the makings of an NBA dynasty. This is me speaking again. I'm not a Raptors fan. I really do agree with Yasmin here. Toronto played a big role in unmaking, or at least pausing, the Warriors dynasty. The league's title hierarchy has lacked the same inevitability ever since. That Raptors core would have received a fair shake at maintaining the chief juggernaut throne, especially given how things have turned out for the supposed to be inevitable Nets. Plenty of other moments scattered through Toronto's history qualify for consideration here as well. What if the Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan core ever busted through LeBron James? What if Vince Carter leaves Toronto under better circumstances? Or not at all? What if Chris Bosh never bolts from Miami? Is there an alternate reality where Tracy McGrady stays? Nominating negatives like what if the Raptors never traded for Kawhi is something I've staunchly avoided throughout the entire process. Relative to the sentimental value held by DeRozan, though, I do think it's a fair question. Duale also wondered what the complexion of Raptors history would look like had they poached team president Masai Ujiri during the Bosh era. That is something that I didn't even fathom, and it would be just absolutely mind-melting. That does it for the Atlantic Division what ifs. Let me know if you're a fan of this team or just follow the NBA in general, what your biggest what if for any of these franchises would be. And please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you consume it. And as usual, until next time, I leave you with a shout out to the one, the only Frank Ntilikina.